and welcome to a bit of an introduction to Photoshop. I'm going to work with Photoshop CS5 because that's the one that all staff have on their computers, and really pretty well everything I've got to say and show you in CS5 is basically the same in Creative Cloud, particularly at this level. So the first thing to do is we've got to open Photoshop. So you might have it in a number of places on your computer. You may have it here in the launch pad. And if you couldn't find it, you would just go and search and start typing Photoshop there. But if you've looked carefully at my screen, you'll see that it's down here on my toolbar, Photoshop CS5. So I'm going to double click on it. And here we go, opening CS5. Now, most of you won't have this little window here. This one is an add-on that I've got, so I'm just going to close it and get it out of the way. So this is what you see when you first open Photoshop. Now, most people get a bit freaked because you can see the desktop behind you, but that actually has a really good advantage when you're working on documents, and I'll get to that later. So it's really good if you can get used to working this way, particularly when you're using a Mac. If you're using a PC at any stage, you don't have this issue. It's got a backdrop on it. So the first thing we need to do is most really set the workspace that we're going to use the most. Essentials is cool, but I'm not real keen on it. The one I like, this one here, Design, and it's not bad, but it hasn't got a couple of things that I like to use. Painting, there's one there, which is really good if you're doing a lot of that, and painting using brushes and that. But I always choose Photography, and you can see there's a couple of others there as well, but I'll choose Photography, because it has the navigator, which is something I want to use, and it has our layers palette, which are the things that we will use the most. I'm just going to close that swatches so we can get it out of the way. So here's our Photoshop CS5 workspace. We've set it up for photography. So we've got here the navigator. There's information about the image that's open and the histogram. There's a heap of little options down here, which we'll get to as we need. We won't worry about this little menu in here. The layers is something we will look at in the layers palette. Down this side is the toolbar. Now I can click on here and I can move the toolbar around if I want to. But it's got a lot of very important features that we're going to have to get used to. This little one at the top here is the most commonly used part of it. It's the move tool. And almost between every process you're going to click on this. Now, if you look carefully at these, and I'll go down to one that we need to look at, I'll go down to the gradient fill. If I zoom in a bit here, you can see that there's these little arrows underneath everything. That means that there's more than one tool. So if I right click, I get different options. Now, when you first opened Photoshop CS5, you most probably had the gradient tool there, not the paint bucket tool. I've used the paint bucket tool a lot, and we'll use it in this exercise that we're doing. So I've got that clicked. So all of these options have different options, and we can look at them at different times. So that's really important to remember. The two ones that we want to have open for our first task will be the paint bucket tool. So we want to right click it and make sure that's paint bucket, and the magic wand tool. When you first opened, it's most probably the quick selection tool there, which is handy too, but for what we're going to look at, maybe the magic wand tool might be handier. And that's the workspace that I have all the time. So they're all our tools, and we'll look at exactly what they all do at a different tutorial. Down here are our active colours. If I click on one there, I get to choose my colour from there. Or I can go to swatches and I can say I want my active colour to be black, and I want the other one to be white. And black and white is what we're going to have in there to start with. Now to close this palette that I clicked on, so that's our swatches palette, that's colours. That's going to be handy to know about. I won't worry about these other ones until we need them. These are to do with the character palette and the paragraph palette, and they can be quite handy at a later date. So when we first open Photoshop, this is what we get. We've set it to photography. We've got the palettes and menus that we want here. We've got the tools down the side. I'll go back to the select tool. We won't be worrying too much about what's up on this bar because it won't affect us. We've got our menu along the top as always. So file menu, edit, and you can see that because there's no image open, most of these are grey. Image, the layers, and so on. A lot of these won't affect us in our first tutorial, but we'll play with them. Now you notice what just happened? I've just clicked on the desktop and Photoshop appears to have disappeared, but it's still there. Just click there and it brings it back. So if you need to click on the desktop to look for a folder, there it is. I can access all my desktop, but Photoshop's still open. See, it's got that little black dot down the bottom there. It means it's still active, and that can be really handy. And that's why I like this open desktop, particularly if I've got a folder that I've got images in that I'm going to work with. So that's the first thing that you need to be able to do, is open Photoshop, have a bit of a, see what these different palettes are, and if you hover over them, they should tell you. Yeah, lasso tool, rectangular marquee tool, magic wand, and so on. Spot healing brush, the brush tool, they're all there. So you can play around with them. Okay, that's all we need to worry about for our very first lesson.